Hello, my friend, and welcome to Grow Your Video Business. This is the podcast for videographers and studio owners who want to learn how to get paid what they're worth, run a smarter business, and live a better life. I'm Ryan Coral from Studio Sherpas, and I am your host. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Core Group and Storyblocks. Buckle in. Why would I say that? Buckle in. If you're driving, I hope you are buckled in. If you're not, don't worry about it. Today's episode, I interviewed Dr. Jennifer Goldman-Wetzler, and we talk about 4 conflict habits, how we get stuck, and some practices to create win-win outcomes with employees, contractors, and even clients. Before we jump in, I want you to know that today is the start of the free 5-day Grow Your Video Business Challenge, and you can still get access. I'm going to be walking you through some key concepts that I teach in our paid course called the Video Business Academy, and I'm going to help you get clear on your focus, your niche, your marketing approach, and you'll also meet hundreds of other video makers and business owners. And after this week, you will walk away with a brand new plan for your video business, or at least a fresh perspective with some new ideas on how to grow your video business. Pause this episode and go register at studiosherpas.com/challenge. And if you can't show up live this week, don't worry. The videos will be available until Friday, but you got to register to get access. So go to studiosherpas.com/challenge. With that, let's get on with the show. If there was one thing that could have ended my business 17 years ago, it would be because of the numbers. I hate accounting, taxes, W-9s, W-2s, W-40s. Spreadsheets, all of that stuff. And I hate it mostly because I'm afraid of it. I'm just not great with numbers. If this sounds familiar, or if you're so new in your business that it's not even on your radar yet, you need Core Group. Core Group can help you create financial systems and tax strategies that you need so you can grow profitably, and they've been doing this for over 20 years. They become an extension of your team so that you can stay in your lane of expertise and then lean on them to help guide you along the way. For me, having a team of experts in my corner to help keep track of our books and just to make sure that we're budgeting for taxes appropriately, to have an actual strategy for our taxes and our accounting is priceless. And it allows me to sleep easier at night, knowing that I don't have to be an expert in that arena. If you want to avoid surprises in your video business, and you want experienced help building a plan for the future that you want, both professionally and personally, head over to studiosherpas.com/core for more information. And when you're ready to set up a free consult with them, make sure to mention Studio Sherpas for a special discount too. Got your back. Get more out of your accountant. Go to studiosherpas.com/core. What's up, friends? Hey, welcome to this episode. Today, my guest is Dr. Jennifer Goldman-Wetzler. She is the founder and CEO of Alignment Strategies Group, the New York-based consulting firm that helps CEOs and their executive teams optimize organizational health and growth. She is also the author of Optimal Outcomes: Free Yourself from Conflict at Work, at Home, and in Life. Oh man, I'm so glad that you're here today, which was also selected as a Financial Times Book of the Month. Dr. Goldman-Wetzler, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here. It's always, I was telling you before we got rolling here, as I'm reading, all your bio and all the things that you've done and people that you hang out with, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. We're in the presence of greatness. So thanks for just bringing your expertise to us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I feel the same way. You just answered a question of mine before we got started that I could only ask a videographer. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. So the idea behind this, this word conflict, I'm not going to ask you to define it. I love this, the concept of being free of conflict, right? I think that that's just not a regular thought. I think we all just assume that this is the case, and we've just got to figure out how to overcome it, how to deal with it, how to, not make people hate us, or if they do, just make sure that they don't harm us, or like whatever the case may be. But you kind of take a different angle or a different approach. Talk to me. Tell us, like, what is that? What makes what you do different?
So I've been in the field of conflict for 20 years. And the field that I'm building on has been around for about 40 years. And it's all about collaborative, win-win, principled negotiation. And a lot of people all around the world have benefited tremendously from that win-win principled negotiation work and methodology. And it's benefited people from leaders in business to leaders in government and academia all around the world. And yet, what I have found over the last 25 years of my work is that sometimes our efforts to resolve conflict don't work, right? So if we think about the international sphere and countries who have been trying to, I think of Israel, Palestine as the prime example of this, trying to work things out. And no matter how far and how close they get, things blow up and don't don't stay resolved.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what happens. And we all probably have that experience in even more mundane work situations or at home with our spouses, our children, our parents, where we think we've kind of tied something out nicely with a bow, or we're trying so hard and offering option after option to people.
Like my 6-year-old.
People rebuff our efforts. Exactly. It just doesn't work sometimes. So my work is all about when you find yourself in that situation, you've been trying hard to figure things out, but it just doesn't work. What can you do? And so what I do is talk all about how to, instead of trying to resolve something that has shown itself to be unresolvable, to free yourself instead. And we can talk much more about exactly what does it mean to free yourself and how do you do it.
Well, that's exactly my follow-up question. So let's.
Great. So it can help to begin with talking about, well, how do we get stuck in these kinds of recurring conflicts in the first place? And I don't want to stay there, because one thing I found after 5 years of doing research on intractable conflict is that I could have spent the rest of my life, and many people do, just looking at the causes of these kinds of conflicts that keep us stuck. So I want to talk about it, but I don't want to stay there. So we're going to move on. But first, it is important to say one way that we get stuck in these ongoing conflicts is that we use what I call our conflict habits. And those conflict habits interact with other people's conflict habits and keep us locked in a pattern of interaction that becomes self-reinforcing and very difficult to break free. So when we find ourselves in that conflict loop, what I call this conflict loop, we want to ask ourselves, what is something that I could do that would be different from what I've been doing before? And I talk about 4 conflict habits. One of them is that we blame other people. Another one is that some of us, we blame and shame ourselves. So we think we're the reason why we're stuck in this thing, and we're like looking inside of ourselves and trying to find what our fault. Some of us shut down in the face of these conflicts, and what happens is they just kind of bubble until they bubble over, and then you really have a big problem on your hands. And others of us are these relentless collaborators. You know who you are. People who have learned this win-win negotiation methodology and are always trying, offering option after option to other people. But the problem is when those people don't respond in kind, we're stuck, right? We're pouring more money, energy, time, resources down the drain, expecting to resolve something. So we get stuck in these conflict loops. And the way to free yourself from a conflict loop is that there's a series of 8 practices that that we can talk about some of them. But the first thing to do is to simply stop and pause and notice how you've gotten stuck. So people can go to my website at optimaloutcomesbook.com, and you can take a free quiz. If you go to optimaloutcomesbook.com/resources, you'll see the conflict habits quiz, and you can find out in 7 minutes. It's a free, easy quiz to take. You can find out what your conflict habit is, and if you hit a button at the end of the quiz, you can actually send the quiz to someone who's a colleague or a friend or a spouse, anyone you're in relationship with, and have them take it too. And then you can find out what's your habit, what's their habit, and then you'll see the pattern you've gotten stuck in. But the main key is you first take a pause and notice, how have you gotten stuck? And then ask yourself, what would be something constructive that I could do that would be different from what I've been doing before? So if I've been in blame mode, which is my habit, my conflict habit, where I just will blame other people as a default, I have to ask myself, well, what could I do that would be constructive that's not blaming someone? So sometimes just taking a pause is doing something differently. Instead of reacting immediately, just stopping and noticing that I'm about to go blame someone. Or even if I'm in the midst of blaming someone, I can stop and say, which I totally did the other night, I can say, I notice that I'm going into blame mode and I'm going to stop and calm myself down. And of course, it depends on who you're talking to. You may not feel comfortable doing that when you're talking to a colleague or a manager, but it may be more appropriate if you're with a family member or a friend. So the main key is do something different from what you've done before. But you can't stop there. So that's where all the 7 other practices come into play.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear the practices. And then if you would just go over like what you've got blame, I'm like, which one am I?
Yeah. Yeah. Should I say the 4 habits?
Yeah, I would love it.
Yeah. So the 4 habits, number 1 is blame others. So many of us, when we, particularly if we're like a competitive type, that sense of competition can really help us in life, but it can also get in our way. And sometimes when we're in a conflict situation, we can end up using that sense of competitiveness and it gets a little warped. And so we end up blaming other people for things that may or may not be their fault. And our purpose is well-intentioned, right? We want to win the conflict. We want to win an argument, win the fight. But what happens is usually when we're stuck in that conflict loop, we're not winning anything. We're just spending time spinning our wheels, hoping that something's going to change. And usually it doesn't. And so that's one way we get stuck on this conflict loop. So the first conflict habit is blame others. The second conflict habit is we blame and shame ourselves. So some of us, rather than blaming outwardly, we actually take it inwardly. So even if a situation is objectively not completely 100% our fault, we will well-intentionally want to look for what did we do wrong? What could I learn from this? What could I do better? And that's all well and good until it turns into self-destruction and kind of sitting and stewing. And that tends to, again, keep us stuck, spinning our wheels inside of our own head, not making any progress. We're not resolving anything. We're not freeing ourselves from anything. That's we blame ourselves. Then there's shutdown. So avoiding conflict, again, many of us do with good intentions. If an issue is not that important to us, if a relationship is not that important to us, it can be a really smart move to avoid a situation. The problem is if we're doing that over and over and over again about an issue that is important or in a relationship that is important to us, those things tend to stick around, they boil over, and then we've got a really big problem on our hands.
Now, if my wife is listening to this, sorry to interrupt. I said, if my wife is listening to this episode, she will say, oh, when we first got married, Ryan, you were the shutdown guy. Like we would get in an argument and oh man, I'd be like, yeah. Anyway, yes, I can relate to that. So continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Great. No, it's okay. It sounds like you have done some work.
Oh man, yes,
on yourself.
She helped walked me through so much of that. It was so good. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Often it really helps to have someone else who does it differently, whose habit is different, and you can learn from each other.
Yep.
And so the final conflict habit is relentlessly collaborate. So we've got blame others, blame yourself, or blame and shame yourself, shut down, and relentlessly collaborate. And this last one is a little more counterintuitive than the first 3. It doesn't show up on any other conflict assessment that I know about, but it comes out of my own research and also my own practice with hundreds and thousands of clients and students of mine. I teach at Columbia University, and I work with all different kinds of organizational leaders. And what I found was we as a culture, as a society, particularly in the West, but also very much in Asia and other parts of the world, have learned over the last at least 40 years about how to collaborate with each other. And in some organizational settings, this is so inculcated and so expected as the way to behave that many of us have become these relentless collaborators, that we think this is the only way to resolve conflict. We must provide options to other people, and we should tell other people what our interests are and why we want what we want. And then we ask them, why do they want what they want? And when you're dealing with someone who, for whatever reasons they may have, is not interested in playing that game with you or doing that with you, no amount of you doing it is going to get you very far.
Right.
And so, like I said before, people end up pouring a lot of time and energy and, hiring facilitators and mediators and to deal with something that is not going to be resolved in that way. Mm-hmm. Using that methodology.
Yeah.
So I ask people to honestly identify yourself, and that's why I created the quiz, because it can be hard to know which one of these four is your default, and to really pause and reflect on where are you today, much like you must have done to know, when I first was in my marriage, I was in shutdown mode. You have to kind of stop and self-reflect. So this work is not easy. Mm-hmm. But it can be simple. It's just not necessarily easy because it takes courage to build those courage muscles to say, I'm going to look at myself. I'm going to take responsibility for my own actions. But of course, the freeing thing is that once you take responsibility on yourself, rather than wanting other people in the situation to change, you have so many more degrees of freedom than you would if you are waiting for other people to do things differently.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for diving into those a little bit more. This is really helpful to get my brain wrapped around those. So we've got the habits now. We've got some practices. Give us some more. So I love that stopping, reflecting. I think that's one of my favorite practices when significant moments happen, whether they're positive or negative, but to stop and to take note of what happened and can I choose my, how I respond to this versus just going to whatever muscle I've flexed for so long, shutdown mode or whatever. So would love to hear some of these other ones.
Absolutely. So the first practice is identify your conflict habits. And the second practice is taking a pause in an even deeper way, but it gives you something to hold on to, something to actually do while you're pausing, which is called creating a map. It's a conflict map. And it's very simple. You can take out any blank piece of paper, or again, you can go online to the resources section of the website and you'll find a conflict map PDF and it'll give you space. And you can even do this online with some really cool online conflict mapping software. So depending on, what's fun for you. But you just take out this blank screen or blank piece of paper and ask yourself, who is involved in this situation that I am thinking about? So you have to have some kind of situation in mind that you're currently dealing with. And your first job is just put the names of the people or the groups that are involved down on that map. And then you want to draw circles around each of the people or groups that are involved. And then draw lines to connect those people to show how the people and groups are connected. Mm-hmm. The second step is to get creative with it and ask yourself, who else is involved? Who might be kind of on the fringes or tangentially involved that I didn't think about as being involved in this situation, but they are. And so I'm going to put them on my map. Then you want to expand even further and ask yourself, what events, what catalyzing events, what things have had to either influence the situation itself or what have been influenced by the situation. And so you start to kind of have this really interesting map. And you want to just keep adding, right? The third step is just add. Put things down. This is your time to be creative. You also want to put down on your map anything that will help you tell the story of the situation in a different way than you have before. So I've seen people put colors on the map, names of emotions on their map, little icons with hearts and X's, anything to show feelings, anything to show the story of the situation in a different way. And the final step is to, as we were talking about before, take a step back and pause and observe your map. And ask yourself, what story is this map telling me? And how might that be different from the story that I was telling myself about the situation before I drew my map? Now, I will tell you, for now years, 10 years at Columbia, and for the last year doing these podcasts, interviews, and things with people doing these within 2 minutes. If I give people 2 minutes to do this mapping practice, they will have these epiphanies, like light bulb moments that go off, and notice things about the situation that are clear as day, but that they couldn't see before they created the map. So I've had people say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that the pressure that my manager is under from her manager is kind of flowing down to me. And that's one reason why I have felt so micromanaged and stressed out. And I've been blaming my manager, but actually it did not even occur to me before that my manager was under a similar type of stress or feeling micromanaged herself. And so it doesn't take away my experience. It doesn't mean that I may still feel stressed and angry and annoyed, but it gives me a little window of empathy for my manager that I didn't have access to before. So the mapping practice can really help offer us empathy.
I love that. That's
in a way that very few practices do.
Back when I started my video company, stock footage, it used to be the worst. It was terrible quality, super cheesy shots, and really small selection, and it was really expensive. That is not the case with Storyblocks. They offer affordable subscription plans to their enormous library of stock footage, and with their unlimited access plan, you get access to the whole library, including HD and 4K footage. They've got After Effects and Premiere Pro templates, music, images, sound effects, and more. Seriously, there is tons. There have been so many projects where our team just needed one extra shot. You know, maybe the day after the shoot, the client was like, hey, this would have been a great thing to get. And we're like, ah. Or in post-production, they're like, hey, you know what would be a really cool shot? We've saved our clients and ourselves a ton of money and headaches and heartaches. And we've saved a couple of projects that just needed that one special shot with our Storyblocks subscription. Head over to storyblocks.com/Studio Sherpas to help you create more video with their affordable subscriptions. Yeah, that practice, it's really good. I mean, I'm just thinking through, you know, one of the things I was excited to kind of have you be able to speak into and for me to be able to walk away after this episode was, you know, we've had over the last 17 years, we've had plenty of clients that were frustrated, were annoyed, were angry, upset, not like lots, but enough to where, you know, I'm like, oh man, and then you got to figure out like how to deal with them. And I think having that sense, being able to have that sense of empathy to, you know, back in the day when we were filming tons of weddings, you know, we were working primarily with the bride and the groom, but then, you know, we might be working with dad or with mom or somebody who's actually paying a lot of money for the wedding. And to even just start thinking like, hey, they might be mad or annoyed or like say things to us that maybe they mean, maybe they don't. But to just start thinking like, man, if you're spending $150,000 on a wedding, do you think that you might be a little tense? Do you think that things might, you know, you might be a little sensitive if you're being nickeled and dimed on, you know, something? So to even just be able to think like, who is, you know, whatever client you have that's upset or angry or whatever, to just think like what could be triggering that? Because if you can have a sense of empathy, then your response to them is going to be different than if your heart's not in it at all. You're just like, I don't care. This is what you owe me. Like, that's what it is. But when you can actually connect like on a real human level and just say like, I get it. Like, I hear you. I see you. I understand. That's a much different approach and response than how I was wired probably when I first began my business and, you know, stumbled enough to be like, oh my gosh, I can't deal with people like that. That's not helpful.
Yes. What you're talking about reminds me actually of another one of the core practices in the optimal outcomes method that I write about, which I think could be helpful in the situation that you're describing. So you're talking about working with a family. And so I love the idea of mapping out, you've got the bride, you've got the groom, or you've got two brides and two grooms, and you've got, you know, family on both sides, could be super helpful. And then you've got how those people grew up and where they come from in the world, and so many influencing factors that could lead them to act in certain ways, in addition to what you described as there's the emotions that are running high on the day of their wedding itself. So another one of the practices that's totally relevant to what you're talking about there is something, it's called honor your shadow values. And I distinguish between our ideal values and our shadow values. So our ideal values are those things that we think about when we talk about values. So many companies have a list of values hanging on their walls, or you as an individual, you may even have identified your own individual values or your family's values. So these are things like love and adventure and spirituality, leadership, changing the world, making the world a better place, right? These are all things that I might be happy and proud to share with you and let you know that these are what I care about. So particularly if you're thinking about, people on their wedding day, they may be very pie in the sky thinking about all the things, love is so important.
Happily ever after.
Right. Happily ever after. And then there are these things that I have identified as shadow values. And those are things that we really care about in life, but we are not proud to say that we care about. But the problem is they drive our behavior anyway. Just because we've pushed them down under our conscious awareness doesn't mean they don't exist. Right? They totally exist, and they ooze out in these ways that we can't control. So these are things like status, recognition, power, financial stability, things, and they differ for people. One person's shadow values could be on another person's ideal values list, and vice versa. But it can really sometimes help for us to ask ourselves, well, what are my own shadow values? Yeah. And also, I can't know for sure, Ryan. There's no way for me to know what your shadow values might be, for example. But if you and I are interacting and we're stuck on a conflict loop, I could take a guess at what might be driving you that you can't even see for yourself. Yeah. And even if you could see it, you would never admit it because somewhere along the way of your life, someone told you that is not okay to want that. You are not allowed to want recognition. No way. And you push that down, and now you will never say, I like to be recognized for the work that I do, for example. But if I can sense that may be something that you care about, and it's not going to probably help me to come up to you and say, hey, Ryan, I think you really would like to be recognized. Is that true? That's not what I'm recommending, right? But just for me to know and allow it to be in my thoughts or in my words or possibly in my actions. But even if I just allow it to stay in my thoughts, I never saw this before, but maybe Ryan really would like to be recognized. It will change my behavior towards you just that I acknowledge that inside of myself. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's an example of people on their wedding day.
I love that. I also am thinking about, those different things, and I've got clients in my mind. I'm thinking about, status, recognition, power, and then the opposite of that. It's like lack of status, lack of recognition, lack of power. And when people don't have that thing, or they're afraid they're going to lose it, then obviously like they're going to fight for whatever that thing is. And they're definitely not going to say, well, I'm fighting. My status is like my most important thing, but I'm not telling anybody that. Like, it's just like, it's embarrassing or whatever. But to even think like, oh, there's underlying or shadow values that could be at play. That's really, I love that. That's really helpful.
Yes. And what you just described is thinking to yourself. So I said I could just honor your shadow value inside of my own thoughts, but I could also show you that I'm honoring your need for status in my actions without walking up to you and saying, I think you would like to be recognized for your contributions here or whatever. I could say to you, well, let's think about somebody on their wedding day, and that you have the sense that the status or recognition is really important to them. You could tell them that you've taken a picture of them and that you're going to post it online somewhere that they care about, or you could do something as a gesture to give them that thing that is so important to them, but that feels really taboo to talk about.
Yeah, I like that.
That is a way of honoring their shadow value.
Yeah, that's good.
And you don't have to though, but you can.
Yeah, I love that though. I love. It kind of like in this idea of just like stopping and thinking and. I've never, at least consciously, never really thought like, what are this person's values, so that, and maybe, I don't know, like you just figure it out or something, but to even like go that next level deeper and to think like they do have these other values, these shadow values. How can I, serve them in a way where they're going to feel like, wow, I love being around that guy, right? Because they're like, well, I never even said I cared about status or whatever, but it's just, I feel more status when I'm around.
Yes, I am not suggesting using this methodology as a way to manipulate other people's emotions. Let's just be clear about that.
Use it for good or for evil. Yes, that's great.
However, what you just said is totally true, that if you can sense that somebody cares about something that's hard for them to speak because it may be culturally a taboo thing to speak about, you can help them feel good. And if your job as a videographer with someone, with family after family on their wedding day is to help raise their status in the world, right? If they've paid, like you said, they've paid, hundreds of thousands of dollars to put on an event and show off in front of all their friends and family, or just, have fun with their friends and family, but they want people to feel well taken care of on that day. For you to take care of them, most likely that will enable you to have a more positive relationship with them, because you're giving them what you suspect a family in that situation might need, no matter who they are.
Yeah.
Right. Also, I wanted to say, in the book and also on the website, there is a list of values. Cool. It often helps. I remember when I first did this more than 10 years ago with a group, and I said, think of your values, and the feedback that I got, because I did it as an experiment to solicit feedback, and the feedback people said was, it was really hard to just willy-nilly think about my values. So there's a values inventory that you can download, and that can really help. And then there's also a whole values packet that will walk you through this step by step about how to use that values inventory and how to identify your own and other people's ideal and shadow values, and then how to make that final step of honoring your own and other people's shadow values.
I love that. I almost was going to ask you, because I love that short list that it's like, oh yeah, status. I haven't even thought about that could be a value, or recognition, power, the fact that you have a list. Thank you for making that. I'm very curious to read the rest of those. But I would say, one of the things that when I started my business, I never wanted to get in sales. I just was I just want to love people, be with them, whatever. Can I just talk for a living and not have to sell anything? What can I do for money that's not selling? But what I've understood is that, we have what we're able to create for our clients is amazing. It's unbelievable. And as soon as I started believing that what we can do can, help create a legacy for a family, or help a business make tons more money so they can have a greater impact in the world. When I started thinking like that, I went from thinking I'm not selling anything. I'm creating an opportunity for somebody to have something that's going to be so helpful in their life or in their business or whatever. So for me, it just felt more like, hey, I'm best at trying to guide my clients to making a good decision. And that might not be to go with us. It might be to go with somebody else, but understanding people, understanding what they need and what they want and what their problem is, and asking good questions, and really just trying to get a sense of who they are and what they care about. That's one of the best ways that we can serve our clients. So all the stuff that you're talking about, I was kind of, joking, and I know you were joking, well, don't use that for to manipulate. It's really just to the better you can understand people, the better you can figure out, can I help them? Can I actually serve this person in a powerful way that's going to, give them the best kind of video and the best kind of experience, or not, right? Because that's part of it too. And quite honestly, some of these shadow values, I'm some of these, I'm really curious to list, but there are some types of people that for me, I'm I don't value those same things. So they're probably going to be better fit with somebody else. And that's okay too. That's actually smarter if I can identify those things to say oh man, those are my same values. Let's work together because this will be really cool. We value the same stuff. Or oh man, that's so opposite of what I value that I'm just going to be cringing the entire time we're together.
Yes. Well, what you're saying reminds me of a quote that one of my mentors, Dr. Mort Deutsch, who is widely considered the father of conflict resolution, something he told me that I have now written down and quoted him as saying, which is, he said, prevention is the best medicine. And that is one of the practices in this methodology, is about how to not only manage and free yourself from conflict once it's already occurred, but also how to prevent it from getting worse in the first place, or even prevent it from happening in the first place. And my understanding of why Mort said that is because it is because of the nature of the conflict loop, which is his research was one of the main things that that brought into our awareness this idea that conflict loops exist. He basically said his research found that cooperation begets cooperation and conflict begets conflict.
Yeah.
So once you begin having conflict with someone, it's more likely to lead to more conflict. So one of the best things you can do is just prevent it from happening in the first place. And like you said, I think a very smart strategy is to say, I am likely to find myself down the road in conflict with this person if I take them on as a client, because I recognize from that first conversation that I had with them that where they want to go with their experience or their wedding day or their business need doesn't align with who I am and my values. And therefore, it's better for me to say, this is not right for me, but there might be someone else who I could refer you to who might be a better fit for you, or just, say that this is not right for me. So of course, not everybody is lucky enough to financially be able to make that kind of decision. But if you are, and of course it will likely help you become more able to make those decisions because when you take on clients who are a good fit for you, you're more likely to do better work for them.
100%.
But in any case, yeah, it's always good. And this work is very much about not only learning about other people, as you've made the point, but also learning about yourself. You can't know if someone's values are misaligned with yours unless you know what your values are in the first place. So doing that kind of work is super important.
Yeah, I love that. Well, this has been super fun. Yeah, man, light bulbs going off. I love it. I think you had mentioned, but where can people find the book, and how can they keep up with the work that you've got going on?
The best place is optimaloutcomesbook.com. And on LinkedIn is where I'm the most active. And I post there regularly. So Jen Goldman-Wetzler on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Any parting words? How can you leave us today? How do you want to leave us today?
My suggestion is that when you find yourself stuck on that conflict loop and you're just going around and around having the same fight over and over again, take a pause, stop, and ask yourself, what could I do that would be different from what I've done before? That's where all the power lies. You have it within yourself already to do something different, to free yourself from that conflict loop. So do something different and free yourself from conflict. And of course, when you free yourself from that conflict loop, other people naturally become freed from it as well, because they can't stay on a conflict loop by themselves.
Yeah.
So you naturally free other people as well.
Freedom begets freedom.
Yes.
Love it.
Love it.
Dr. Goldman-Wetzler, this was super fun. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. Love it. Lots of applicable stuff here. So appreciate you and appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been a total pleasure talking with you. And you can call me Jen anytime.
All right. Look at that. All right, Jen. Well, we'll talk to you later. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I would love to hear from you. Leave me a comment and let me know, out of the 4 conflict habits that were shared, did one of them resonate with you? Do you fall prey to one of them, kind of like I shared? And then out of the different practices that were shared to help create win-win situations, do you feel like any of those will help you? Leave a comment, let me know. Don't forget to show some love to our sponsors, Core Group and Storyblocks. You can go to studiosherpas.com/sponsor or go to their respective links that we've shared in the show. And I hope you join me on the 5-day Grow Your Video Business Challenge. It is free and it will knock your socks off. Just kidding. I hit my mic, so I was going to say it will knock your mic off. That's just how quick I am on my feet. It's amazing, you guys. Just kidding. Not that quick, because this episode has been edited quite a bit, especially this outro here that I've stumbled over multiple times. I want you to know, at the end of the day, I am for your success, for the success of your video company, for you as an entrepreneur. So let me know how I can cheer you on, encourage you, keep challenging you to not stay stagnant, but to always be pursuing growth personally, professionally, so that you can make the biggest impact in the world with your business, through your life. So I'm here to support you, and that's all. I hope to see you on next week's episode, and I hope to see you inside of the 5-day Grow Your Video Business Challenge. That's it from here in north of Detroit, Michigan. Ryan Coral signing off. Sayonara. Oh my gosh, I am such a dork. Wow. I can't believe people put up with me. This is amazing.